আসসালামু আলাইকুম, স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি আমাদের নিয়মিত আলোচনা ভয়েসেস অফ ডেভেলপমেন্টে। আমরা সকলেই জানি ন্যাশনাল ডেভেলপমেন্ট প্রোগ্রাম এনডিপি এই আলোচনাটির আয়োজনের মূল কারণ হলো আমাদের যে ফান্ড কাট হয়েছে, ডোনারদের যে ফান্ড কাটটা হয়েছে এবং আস্তে আস্তে যে ডোনারদের পক্ষ থেকে ফান্ড শ্রিঙ্ক করছে, এই পরিস্থিতিতে বাংলাদেশ কিভাবে নিজেকে সামলে নিচ্ছে এবং কিভাবে ভবিষ্যতে বাংলাদেশ নিজের পায়ে দাঁড়াবে সেটা নিয়ে আসলে আমরা আলোচনা এবং পরিকল্পনা করছি। আজকে আমাদের স্টুডিওতে উপস্থিত আছেন মিস্টার ড্যানিয়েল গোরেভান, Head of Advocacy and External Affairs, Start Network. We welcome you to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are most welcome. আপনারা জানেন যে আমরা প্রতিটি পর্বে একজন ডেভেলপমেন্ট এক্সপার্টকে এখানে নিয়ে আসি এবং ওনার কাছ থেকে শুনতে চাই। আজকে আমরা বাংলাদেশ তথা গ্লোবালি এটার কি ইফেক্ট এবং এটা নিয়ে আমরা কি চিন্তা করছি এটা নিয়ে ড্যানিয়েলের সাথে আলোচনা করব। সো ড্যানিয়েল, as we all know that the fund cut, it is really a shock for the world, I must say now. How did you get into it? Like when you heard that yes, there is a big fund cut all on a sudden, how you just dealt with it?
Sure, I think that the cuts to the funding in the US in particular were quite shocking, and quite a shocking scene to see the world's richest man, Elon Musk, on behalf of the world's richest government, the US government, cutting most of their development and humanitarian funds.
So all of a sudden?
Yeah, all of a sudden. So like really quite shocking. So almost overnight, 40%. So the US was responsible for 40% of global humanitarian funding, and they cut 85% of their programs almost overnight. So I think the way that it was done was quite shocking and quite callous. But I think that what we've seen over the course of the last 6 months is the really massive impact that it's had around the world. So by some estimates, over 300,000 people have lost their lives as a result of these funding cuts. And so Start Network is a membership network of over 130 organisations and spread across the globe. And our members had really serious difficulties, some losing up to 2/3 of their funding almost overnight, unable to help the people who are in desperate need. So truly shocking. I think that one of the things that is particularly worrying is that the US took this step, but the other governments who we might have expected to step into the gap, instead of providing more, they're also providing less. So the big European donors, Germany, the UK and others are also cutting back their funds. So it's a truly dramatic change in the humanitarian system, almost overnight, with huge implications across the globe.
So yeah, it was a really shocking incident, and we all are the victim, let's say, or sufferer of this thing. So do we have any specific data globally, or do we have any data for Bangladesh? How much people got affected directly and indirectly in this fund cut situation?
Yeah, I think that so like you say, the impacts have been really wide-ranging and devastating. I think I mentioned that up to 300,000 people have lost their lives, but that also doesn't count some of the longer-term effects. So if it's children who are not vaccinated, or the closing down of health centres across lots of different crisis-affected countries. So there's the immediate impacts, and I think there's going to be huge knock-on impacts in terms of the development gains which will be lost and pushing people further back into crisis. I think first and foremost need to remember that this is people who have relied upon assistance for their lives and their livelihoods in the first instance. And we saw there was a process launched by the United Nations, the Humanitarian Reset, which sought to radically prioritise the amount of assistance that the UN and the collective humanitarian organisations deliver, cutting down the amount they aimed to reach this year by over a quarter. So a really, really significant reduction in the number of people that are assisted and the types of assistance they receive. We've also seen that humanitarian organisations and development organisations have had an extremely difficult time to try to reorganise and help the communities that they serve with these overnight funding cuts. They've tried to find new sources of funds. They've tried to carry on with their programs with less money. Lots of them have had to let go of significant numbers of staff. They've had to reorganize, they've had to shrink, and some of them have had to unfortunately close down. So I think an extremely worrying situation, like across the board. There's some statistics, like I said, the United Nations ones and the prioritised global humanitarian response plan. But I think that the impacts and the effects of this will play out over years and not just in the course of a couple of months.
Yeah, so it's a really big impact, and we had so many interviews, and where we found that actually on this issue, the government of different countries, they are not playing that significant role that they should play, because this is a big number of people in the country. So what do you think in this aspect?
Sure. I mean, I think that the reality is that something has to change. So for Start Network, for many years, we've been arguing for a transformation of the humanitarian system into one that is more proactive and one which is more locally led. And it's been slow progress on this. I think that if there's it's difficult to talk of silver linings given so many millions of people are affected. But I think that the humanitarian development sectors now, they have no choice but they have to change, because it doesn't look like US money will come back, and the other traditional donors are reducing their funds as well. So I think there needs to be more creative solutions. National governments, of course, play an extremely critical role in that, but also local and national organisations, many of whom are taking the lead. And you'll know more from NDP in Bangladesh to innovate their way out of these difficulties to try to help the people in need in Bangladesh or in other countries that need it most. So there's some hope in this moment that governments, other actors will step up to help, and the donor money that remains will really prioritise locally led and more proactive action. One of the things that we've seen is, which I think is very relevant in Bangladesh, is that a lot of the crises and the disasters worldwide, up to a third of them, are very predictable. So with climate modelling, and we know when there's going to be droughts or floods, etc. But only a small fraction of the humanitarian development money goes to anticipatory action. I think that this is maybe a moment where we can convince governments, we can convince humanitarian actors, we can convince the United Nations to really, really take this seriously and move more fully to anticipating crisis rather than just responding to crisis.
Oh, that's great. So here, as you are representing the hub, like a Start Network, so a network like you and other networks, they may also play a very vital role here to do the advocacy to the government, right? So what should be the role of other hubs as well? Start Network is doing, you said that Start Network have done these things and they are doing it. What should be the responsibility of other hubs as well?
Well, I think that, one thing just to bear in mind is when we're looking at these cuts, these governments, so the US government, the European governments, they can clearly afford to fund humanitarian development assistance. In some ways, it should be an obligation on them. If we're looking at the context in Bangladesh, it's very vulnerable to climate change, but has not historically been a major emitter of carbon dioxide. Those countries which are rich, the humanitarian and the overseas aid budgets are a tiny fraction of their economy, so they can clearly afford to do it, and they should do that. And networks like Start Network will convince them to do that. I think that in addition to that, what we're focused on, including with some of the other networks in other countries and globally, is to argue for this new type of response, one which looks ahead which doesn't just respond to crises and prioritises the leadership and the voices and the perspectives of local leaders like NDP and the other members of Start Network in Bangladesh.
Yeah, of course, we all have to be more active in getting response and get more responsible to pursue this issue to those people who really can help, right?
Yeah.
So really the situation, if we think of, and the possibilities, if we think everything can be done in a formative way, if we think to do it. So what is your suggestion? How should we proceed the further approach? Like what should be our approach? Always we have to be donor dependent? Or there should be a different approach, and what would be the government roles here?
Yeah, okay. I think if one thing the aid cuts has taught us is that the humanitarian and development sector was over dependent on a small number of donors.
Yes.
And I mean, lots of people prior to the aid cuts from January and February were warning of this, that it's a brittle system. And then it took a new government, and it's really caused a huge amount of damage. So I think that there needs to be a realisation amongst those who work in development and humanitarian that there's a new approach is needed, and not just looking to replace one donor with another donor. Mm-hmm. Having said that, I think that there is definitely a role for philanthropies and philanthropic organisations and some of the emerging economies or big economies that are like newly rich countries who have historically not contributed as much to kind of multilateral or kind of individual development and humanitarian efforts. So I think there's definitely a role for governments to act internationally. Of course, I think critically it's national level governments, if we're talking about action on climate change or social protection or on economic development. The national governments, member states are the core constituency to help to make that happen. And the role of civil society is obviously to kind of encourage them to take that responsibility and to support them in kind of meeting those obligations. I think it is different in different contexts. So it's different in Bangladesh compared to some countries where there's really significant civil conflict. So if we're looking at Sudan and like Ukraine and or Ukraine is an international conflict, but also in Gaza, there's different obligations for those countries that are engaged in fighting wars, and a different role for the international community and international aid actors as well. So it's clear that governments can and should do more, whether that's at a national level in terms of social protection and development, but also some of these new or emerging like international donors. So there's not just this heavy reliance upon the kind of traditional donors, the US and some of the European countries. So I think just to kind of bring it back, the shock of the aid cuts has, I think, it's prompted a lot of soul searching amongst humanitarian development professionals, and this realization that there needs to be a new model. I don't think anyone has the perfect solution, but I think there's at least a realization that something has to change, and it has to be a mixture across donors, governmental action, and civil society solidarity. And
the partnership approach should be thought in a different way, like the resources the CSOs have or local NGOs have, the INGOs can utilize those resources, and with a cumulative fund we can do something better. And maybe earlier the budget was 50 billion, but now it would be like 15 billion, but maybe the standard would not be in that way, but the community will continue to get developed. And when all the organizations will come in one platform, then there will be less segment, like this portion is going to donors, then to the CSOs, then to the local NGOs. So the segmentation would be less, and the proper utilization of the whole fund will be ensured.
Sure.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think from Start Network's perspective, the priority should be given to local and national civil society. Some of the studies that we have done show that local national organisations, the aids delivered to communities is viewed as a higher quality, it's faster, and the international agencies, if we're being honest about it, they take more resources to give the same amount of aids to the communities. So I think there's a very clear and compelling case that the donor money which does exist should really prioritise local and national organisations. That isn't to say that international organisations can't play a role, but it's really to kind of support, like you're saying, the local and national civil society, and where possible to kind of complement the government's efforts if there are gaps or there's some particularly vulnerable populations, or there's a lack of capacity. So instead of thinking, first of all, what can we do, it's to say, well, what do the local national organisations want to do, what does the government want to do, and how do we complement that, and then only afterwards thinking, well, how do we fill in some of those gaps, rather than thinking that first.
So as an advocacy network, can we request the Start Network to go forward for advocating that the government should think of this fund cut and consider the life of those people who has lost their job totally, and their lifestyle and their living, everything has been changed. So there should be something in the policy that for NGOs as well. So as you are representing advocacy network, so can you play any role over here?
Sure. I mean, I think you know the context here so much better, of course, and and as I understand it, there was a really significant number of job losses from those who are working in the
50,000 till 50, now we know,
Okay. Which is a huge number of people. I think that the one thing to just emphasise is that that's 50,000 people with excellent skills, who are very committed. For some decades worked on humanitarian development issues and for humanitarian organisations, and I'm always struck by how talented and how hardworking and how skilled my colleagues are. You know, so I think that government should really recognise that as a really major resource, and if there's something that they can do to kind of tap into that and give them some pathways, if there's other employment opportunities, so that those skills, that experience, that talent and that passion doesn't go to waste.
Yeah, that's a great thing. So thank you so much, Daniel, for your valuable time. I know that you have a very busy schedule, but still you made a time from here, and we hope that your suggestions, actually our plan is to combine and compile these suggestions and present this into a policy level people through a workshop, through a national workshop. So these suggestions, what you suggested, it would be noted, and we will be presenting them as well. And thank you for being the part of Voices of Development and being the part of NDP's initiative.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
সো আপনারা নিশ্চয়ই দেখছেন প্রতি এপিসোডে আমরা চিন্তা করছি শুধুমাত্র ন্যাশনাল নয়, গ্লোবালি আমরা কিভাবে এই চিত্রটাকে তুলে ধরতে পারি এবং এটা আমরা পলিসি মেকারদের কাছে পৌঁছাতে পারি, যেন যারা উন্নয়ন কর্মী হিসেবে নিজেদেরকে দক্ষ করে তুলেছেন তারা যেন তাদের দক্ষতাকে কাজে লাগিয়ে বাংলাদেশকে সহযোগিতা করতে পারে আরও অনেক কাজে, আরও অনেক উন্নয়নে। আপনারা আপনাদের মতামত জানাবেন, এটাই আমরা আশা করি। আপনারা আমাদের সাথে থাকুন, দেখতে থাকুন ভয়েসেস অফ ডেভেলপমেন্ট। ধন্যবাদ।